Usually when we try to understand how the world works, we rely almost entirely on an expectation of visibility.
Right, like being able to physically see the mechanics of something.
Exactly. I mean, think about engineering or mechanics. If you want to understand a vintage mechanical watch, you pry off the back casing, you take a magnifying glass, you peer inside, and you can literally see the brass gears turning,
Yeah.
the tiny rubies holding the tension, the main spring uncoiling.
Yeah, a watchmaker can literally point a pair of tweezers at a specific wheel and say, like, there. That right there is what makes the second hand tick.
Right. It is entirely visible.
It's mechanical, it's cause and effect, and, I mean, most importantly, it's a closed system that our brains can easily map out.
We take so much comfort in that visibility, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We desperately want to know exactly what is pulling the levers in our lives, whether that's the economy or our biology or just the basic laws of physics.
But, and this is where things get wild, the moment you step into the world of mysticism, and specifically the primary source text we're dissecting today, that watchmaker's magnifying glass becomes completely, just utterly useless.
Yeah, it really does.
Because we are looking at a landscape of reality that operates on a completely different physics engine, one that is deliberately hidden in plain sight.
We are dealing with an absolute paradigm shift here. I mean, the text we're examining today asks you to completely discard your reliance on what your optic nerves can process.
Right.
It essentially demands that we look at the invisible architecture that's holding up the visible world.
So, welcome to the deep dive. I am so thrilled that you, the listener, are here with us for this one. Whether you're on your commute or going for a run, or you just have this insane curiosity about the hidden mechanics of the universe, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we have one profoundly intricate source text in front of us. It is a mystical discourse, traditionally called a Maimar, that was delivered in the year 1952. And our singular mission today is to completely deconstruct the architecture of this one text.
Because what the author does here is, frankly, astonishing.
It really is. I mean, he takes a single, totally cryptic sentence from the biblical prophet Micah and uses it to violently overturn our standard definitions of reality and the concept of miracles and even the very purpose of human frustration and struggle.
And, we should probably clarify up front why this matters to someone listening right now in the modern world.
Yeah, that's important.
Because it is so easy to just dismiss a 1952 mystical text based on an ancient prophet as, like, pure theological abstraction.
Okay.
But the framework this text builds is immensely practical.
Oh, completely. It's basically a blueprint.
Exactly. It's a blueprint for understanding why the most profound, earth-shattering changes both out there in the cosmos and internally in your own daily life are almost always the ones you are completely blind to while they're actually happening.
It entirely flips the script on what power, progress, and meaning actually look like. So let's map out where this conversation is going. We're going to start by pulling apart a grammatical puzzle in this ancient verse.
Which is a lot more exciting than it sounds, I promise.
Definitely. And then from that puzzle, we'll slide into a debate about the actual physics of miracles, like what a miracle actually is structurally. Then we are going to look at human psychology, specifically how we let go of our ego.
Which will lead us to completely invert how we think about the relationship between our physical bodies and our spiritual souls.
Right. And finally, we will land on a massive revelation about why your most difficult, uninspired, completely mundane Tuesday mornings might actually be the most cosmically powerful moments of your existence.
So, to initiate all of this, we really have to look at the bedrock. The foundational verse this entire 1952 discourse is built upon is from the book of Micah, chapter 7, verse 15.
Okay, let's hear it.
The English translation reads like this: "As in the days of your coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show him marvelous things."
As in the days of your coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show him marvelous things. I mean, on a surface read, it just sounds like standard prophetic poetry, right?
Yeah, it does. But the author of our source text slams the brakes immediately. He operates under the strict assumption that in these kinds of sacred frameworks, there is just no such thing as a typo.
Right, there are no mistakes.
Exactly. A clumsy grammatical shift isn't poor editing. It is a locked door hiding a massive metaphysical secret. And he points out 3 glaring anomalies in this one sentence.
So let's lay out the context for the first anomaly.
Well, within the broader theology this author is utilizing, this specific verse from Micah is describing the ultimate utopian future, a future era of absolute redemption and clarity.
Okay, the pinnacle of existence.
Right. Yet, the verse benchmarks this ultimate future against the historical exodus from Egypt. It says the future will be as in the days of your coming out of Egypt. But within this exact same theology, the future era is supposed to be infinitely greater, far more elevated, and vastly superior to the Exodus from Egypt.
Yeah, I am really trying to wrap my head around the logic here. Because if this future era is supposed to be the ultimate upgrade, like the absolute peak of human and cosmic existence, why would the prophet compare it to an old, inferior model?
It doesn't make sense, right?
It feels like terrible marketing. It's like, imagine a tech company hiking up a brand new multi-billion-dollar quantum computer by saying, get ready, because this is going to be just like your clunky 1998 desktop.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
It just feels like a massive downgrade. Why benchmark the infinite future against a finite past event?
Well, that tension is exactly what the author wants us to feel. He wants us to be bothered by it. And then he stacks a second anomaly on top of it, a strictly grammatical one.
Lay it on me.
The verse says, as in the days of your coming out of Egypt. Days, plural.
Which makes absolutely no historical sense.
None whatsoever. I mean, the actual historical event of leaving the borders of Egypt, the Exodus itself, occurred on a single day.
Right, they left in one night.
Exactly. There is an entirely different biblical commandment that explicitly says, remember the day you came out of Egypt. Singular. So we have a direct contradiction here. Why does this specific prophecy insist on using the plural days for a single-day event?
And just when you think the sentence can't get any clunkier, we hit the third anomaly. And honestly, I find this one the most jarring when you just read it out loud in English, or in Hebrew for that matter.
Oh, a pronoun shift.
Yes. The verse says, as in the days of your coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show him marvelous things. It shifts violently from the second person directly to the third person, your coming out, to showing him.
It's super awkward.
Who is this mysterious him? If the prophet is talking to the people who came out of Egypt, why didn't he just finish the thought and say, I will show you marvelous things?
So these three anomalies, the inferior benchmark, the plural days, and the shifting pronouns, these are our breadcrumbs. And the author doesn't just give us a dry linguistic answer.
No, that would be too easy.
Right. Instead, to solve this grammatical mystery, he forces us into a profound detour regarding the actual architecture of miracles. He introduces a critical distinction between two entirely different categories of miraculous events.
Let's break those categories down, because this fundamentally changed how I view the whole concept of supernatural events. The text argues that there are miracles that break nature, and then there are miracles that are clothed in nature.
Yeah, so the Exodus from Egypt is the archetypal example of the first category. Miracles that break the rules of nature. Turning a river into actual blood. Splitting a sea so an entire nation can walk through it on dry land. Fire and ice falling from the sky simultaneously.
Just massive cinematic stuff.
Exactly. These are loud, undeniable, aggressive suspensions of the physical laws of the universe. When you witness something like the Red Sea splitting, you know immediately that the normal operating system of reality has just been shattered.
It's the ultimate show of force.
It is.
But then the author contrasts this with the second category, miracles clothed in nature. And he uses the ancient story of Purim to illustrate this.
Which is a fascinating choice.
It is, because if you're familiar with the Purim narrative, you know that the actual text of the story doesn't feature a single supernatural event, like no sea split, no plagues, no divine voices thundering from the clouds.
Right. If you strip away the religious commentary and just read the historical account of Purim, it reads entirely like a gripping political thriller driven by wild coincidences.
Yeah, exactly. A Persian king gets drunk and angry at his queen. He deposes her. A new queen is selected through a beauty contest, and she just happens to be Jewish.
An assassination plot against the king is randomly overheard by the queen's cousin. A royal decree for genocide is issued, but then a series of perfectly timed, insomnia-driven readings of the royal chronicles shifts the king's favor.
Every single event, if you analyze it in isolation, conforms perfectly to the laws of sociology, political science, and basic human behavior.
Totally. From an outside perspective, it's just an incredibly lucky streak of political maneuvering.
But the text calls this a miracle clothed in nature. But here is the claim that made me stop reading and just, stare at the wall. The author states that the source of the miracles clothed in nature is vastly superior, originating from a far higher, more potent level of the divine than the source of the miracles that actually break nature.
I know, it is a total reversal of our baseline assumptions.
Hold on, I need to challenge this. Because humanity universally equates power with disruption.
We really do.
If a hurricane levels a city, we call that a massive display of natural power because of the sheer destruction. If someone can snap their fingers and cause a mountain to float, we consider them infinitely more powerful than someone who just, climbs the mountain. We assume that the more you can smash the existing rules, the stronger your underlying power source must be.
That's the logical human assumption.
Right. So how can the text possibly argue that a series of lucky political coincidences represents a higher divine power than splitting an actual ocean?
Okay. To understand the author's logic here, we have to transition from thinking about power as brute force to thinking about power as absolute mastery.
Mastery. Okay.
Think about what it means to break a rule versus what it takes to master a system. When a divine miracle breaks the laws of nature, like splitting the sea, it certainly demonstrates that the divine power is overwhelmingly stronger than nature. It forces nature into submission by crushing its rules.
Sure, it bullies nature.
Exactly. But notice the dynamic there. It treats nature as a foreign, opposing force. It's a confrontation. Nature says water flows, and the miracle says, I am stronger than you, so water stands up like a wall.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize this. It's like the difference between a crude hack and a masterful algorithm in software engineering.
Let's get on with that.
So if I'm playing a complex video game and I type in a cheat code that allows my character to walk through solid walls, I have broken the game's programming. I've demonstrated that I possess a code that can override the game's physics engine. It's flashy. It gets the job done.
Right, but it's a cheat.
Yeah. But if I am such a profound master of the game that I never use a cheat code, but instead I manipulate the existing physics, utilizing the intended mechanics to orchestrate a flawless, perfectly timed sequence of events where every pixel and every NPC acts exactly as it was originally programmed to, yet I achieve a statistically impossible outcome that demonstrates an exponentially deeper mastery.
That analogy hits the exact nerve of the mystical physics we were talking about. The miracle that breaks nature is the cheat code.
Wow.
In the mystical framework, that kind of miracle comes from a level of divine light that is incredibly intense, but is a light that is profoundly other. It is so far beyond the parameters of the physical world that when it interacts with the world's boundaries simply shatter. The finite reality cannot house that specific frequency of infinite light, so the physical laws break.
But the miracle clothed in nature.
The miracle clothed in nature comes from an even deeper, higher root within the infinite. It comes from a place of such absolute, quintessential power that it does not need to resort to breaking boundaries.
It's subtle.
Very. It can permeate the finite world so thoroughly, so seamlessly, that the natural world itself, while continuing to function perfectly within its own restrictive laws of gravity, politics, and chemistry, acts out the ultimate divine will. It is the perfect, non-destructive integration of the infinite into the finite, rather than the infinite simply, as you said, bullying the finite.
So breaking the rules just proves you are stronger than the system. But seamlessly manipulating the system from the inside out so that the system itself executes your will that shows undisputed, absolute ownership.
And the author pushes this extrapolation to its absolute limit. He notes that there is an ultimate tier to this concept of hidden miracles.
What does that look like?
Well, he brings in a verse in the book of Psalms that praises God with the phrase, "To him who alone does great wonders." Then he weaves in a fascinating commentary from ancient sages on that specific word.
Alone.
They ask, what does alone mean in this context? Their answer is staggering. They interpret it to mean that there are miracles so deeply embedded in the fabric of nature, so flawlessly disguised as ordinary, mundane events, that God alone knows they are miracles.
Wait, meaning the actual person who is being saved by the miracle is entirely clueless?
Precisely. The beneficiary has absolutely no idea it just happened.
Oh, wow.
You might miss your train because you lost your keys, and you spend the morning cursing your bad luck, entirely unaware that missing that specific train saves you from a catastrophic event down the line.
Yeah.
You just assume it was a Tuesday where you misplaced your keys. Only the divine knows the physics of the rescue that just occurred.
That implies that the most profound expressions of infinite power in our reality are the ones we are inherently blind to.
And if we follow that logic, it hands us the key to unlocking the first anomaly in our verse from Micah. Remember, we asked, why on earth would the prophet compare the ultimate glorious future era to the seemingly inferior historical days of the Exodus from Egypt?
Right, the quantum computer versus 1998 desktop problem.
Exactly. The text explains that we fundamentally misunderstood what the upgrade of the future redemption actually is. We assume the future will just be bigger, flashier versions of the Exodus. Plagues of greater magnitude, oceans splitting wider.
More cheat codes.
Yes, more cheat codes. But that would just be breaking nature harder. The ultimate future era isn't about breaking nature, it is about the revelation of the hidden miracles.
Ah, I will show him marvelous things.
Yes, look at the verb. The text emphasizes the Hebrew word arianu, meaning I will show. The primary greatness, the massive upgrade of the future, isn't that brand new, physics-breaking miracles will be introduced? The upgrade is that the incredibly high, mathematically perfect, hidden miracles, the ones closed so flawlessly in nature that right now only God knows about them, will finally be made visible. The cosmic blinders will be removed.
So we will be able to look back at our mundane, everyday occurrences, the annoying coincidences, the global political shifts, the delayed trains, and we will suddenly possess the optics to see the infinite power that was masterminding them all along.
Exactly. So the future is not a downgrade compared to Egypt. The future will take the hidden, superior miracles, the ones that represent the absolute highest divine mastery, and grant them the one single thing they currently lack: visibility.
We'll see them.
We will perceive the hidden miracles with the exact same undeniable, visceral clarity that the Israelites perceived the plagues in Egypt. It is the synthesis of both paradigms, the absolute highest source of power finally made undeniably visible to the human eye.
That completely resolves the first tension. But, I mean, if a hidden miracle is actually a higher manifestation of the divine than a visible rule-breaking one, that forces us to look at the ultimate hidden system, the system that never breaks its own rules. What does this mean for the concept of nature itself? Because this blew my mind. The text essentially uses this logic to build a completely new physics of reality.
It really does. The author transitions from analyzing specific, isolated events like the Purim story to interrogating the very fabric of the physical universe. He wades into a massive, foundational philosophical paradox. How can we possibly recognize the infinite, the limitless, boundless divine within a world that is fundamentally defined by limits?
Let's really dig into this, because this paradox is the engine driving the rest of the discourse. Limitless and limited are not just different. They are mutually exclusive by definition.
Right.
The divine, conceptually, is infinite. It has no edges, no boundaries, no restrictions. It can be all things at all times. But the physical universe, by contrast, is nothing but restrictions.
Right. A tree only exists as a tree because it is biologically restricted from being a rock or a bird.
Exactly. Human beings are defined by our limitations. We need oxygen, we degrade over time, we exist in one spatial coordinate at a time. The laws of thermodynamics are boundaries. Everything is a boundary. So the author is asking, how can infinite energy possibly enter a finite boundary without instantly vaporizing it?
It's a problem of capacity. Think about it like electricity. If you try to run 1,000,000 volts of electricity through a standard, cheap 60-watt light bulb, you don't get a really, really bright light bulb.
You get an explosion.
Right. The finite container violently shatters because it cannot house the energy.
And the text points out that this shattering is exactly what we witnessed during a rule-breaking miracle.
Yes.
When that raw, unadulterated, infinite light, which the mystical texts refer to as the surrounding light, when that makes contact with the world, it doesn't negotiate with the world's limitations. It simply overrides them. The sea splits, the biological laws of disease are suspended, the 60-watt bulb bursts.
But then the author asks us to look away from the miracles and look at the sheer, relentless consistency of the natural world. He points out that for millennia, using the traditional chronological framework of roughly 6,000 years, the system hasn't missed a beat.
It's remarkably stable.
The sun has risen and set. The seasons have cycled. The planetary orbits have held steady. The strong and weak nuclear forces haven't taken a vacation. And the author presents this consistency not as evidence of a cold, mechanical, clockwork universe devoid of a creator, but rather as the ultimate, unassailable proof of limitless divine power.
Okay, I need you to walk me through the logic here, because to a modern secular ear, that sounds like a contradiction.
I know it does.
How does a boring, completely predictable Tuesday morning, where gravity just pulls things down exactly like it did yesterday, prove the existence of an infinite power source? Most people would say that the predictable laws of physics prove you don't need a god to keep things running.
Right. So to bridge that gap, the author makes a brilliant distinction between the creation of a finite object and the perpetuation of a systemic law.
Okay, break that down.
He acknowledges that every specific physical thing in nature is inherently limited. A particular lion has a limited lifespan and a finite amount of kinetic energy. The specific life force animating that single lion is finite. That is obvious. But what about the system of nature itself?
The overarching rules.
Yes. What about the continuity? The fact that the overarching rules of physics, biology, and chemistry never pause, never suffer from systemic fatigue, and never require a reboot over thousands of years.
You're saying the system itself is a perpetual motion machine.
Exactly. And a true perpetual motion machine requires a power source that never ever depletes. In a physical universe where entropy is the rule, where energy dissipates and systems degrade, the unbroken continuity of the foundational laws of nature requires an infinite battery. And the only thing in existence that never depletes, that has zero entropy, is the infinite essence itself.
Oh, wow. So the specific object, the lion, the tree, the planet, is finite. But the unbroken continuity of the system housing that object demands an infinite power source. We usually look for the divine in the extraordinary, in the sudden healings or the massive disruptions. But this text is arguing that the ultimate, unadulterated, infinite power is the sheer stamina required to keep the ordinary running without a single glitch every single millisecond.
But that immediately resurrects our previous paradox.
Right.
Because if the power source sustaining nature is purely infinite, how does it interface with the finite universe without blowing it up? How does the million-volt energy source power the 60-watt bulb for 6,000 years without shattering the glass?
This is where the physics of this mystical universe get incredibly specific.
Yeah, the author introduces a highly technical, mystical concept here to explain the mechanism. He contrasts two different expressions of divine light. We already mentioned the first, the surrounding light. That is the light that causes the Red Sea to split.
The bulb shatterer.
Right. It is purely infinite, and therefore it is fundamentally incompatible with finite boundaries. It can only shatter them. But then he introduces the concept of the line, or in Hebrew mysticism, the kavo.
The kav. This completely blew my mind. Walk us through how the kav operates differently.
The text explains that the kav, this highly concentrated line of light, is rooted in an even deeper, more primordial place within the divine than the surrounding light.
Deeper than the infinite.
Let me explain why. The surrounding light is just infinite. It only knows how to be limitless. But the kav originates from the absolute essence of the divine. And the essence is so supremely powerful, so completely beyond categorization, that it possesses the power to bridge absolute opposites.
Okay, so it can do both.
It has the capacity to be entirely infinite, while simultaneously and perfectly accommodating the finite.
It's like a laser beam compared to a floodlight.
Oh, yes.
The floodlight just washes over everything and blinds you. The laser beam is incredibly intense, but it can be focused to such a precise point that it can operate on a single microscopic cell without damaging the tissue around it.
A perfect analogy. The kav is the mechanism that allows the infinite power of continuity to be injected directly into the finite boundaries of a rock, a tree, or a human body, sustaining its existence perpetually without shattering its physical limitations. The kav carries the infinity of the creator, but translates it so the finite creation can survive the encounter.
So if we trace this logic all the way down to the ground, a flashy, physics-breaking miracle is actually a symptom of a lesser divine light.
Correct.
It's a light that isn't sophisticated enough to work with the world. It just awkwardly breaks it. But the daily rising of the sun is powered by the kav, the deepest, most sophisticated essence of the infinite, which has the unimaginable capacity to condense its limitless power so perfectly that the sun can just act like a sun day after day, year after year.
The author is essentially elevating the utterly mundane to the highest possible spiritual status. The unbroken chain of natural law is objectively the greatest miracle in existence. It is the ultimate paradox achieved. The infinite masquerading perfectly as the finite.
I just want to pause and let the listener absorb what this means for them right now. You are likely sitting in a chair or driving a car or walking down a sidewalk. Gravity is anchoring you. Your heart is maintaining a rhythm. The oxygen in your blood is exchanging in your lungs. We take all of this completely for granted.
We'll never think about it.
But according to this 1952 text, the fact that your biology is functioning normally, predictably, isn't evidence of a cold, mechanical universe. It is the absolute pinnacle of infinite power, operating right inside your cells, perfectly disguised as biology.
And that realization is the pivot point of the entire memoir. Because the author has now established a new hierarchy. He has proven that the highest divine power is found not in breaking the rules, but in seamlessly working within them.
Right.
So the inevitable next question is, how does this apply to human behavior? If nature is a higher expression of divine will than a flashy miracle, how are we supposed to act to align ourselves with that reality?
Which brings us to the psychology of the human ego and two profoundly different methods of surrender. The text draws a direct, almost aggressive parallel between the types of miracles we just analyzed and human psychology. It focuses on a concept called bittul.
Yes, beetle is a central term in this mystical tradition. It roughly translates to nullification, subjugation, or the total surrender of the ego. It is the process of getting the self out of the way so that you can become a pure vessel for the divine. The author outlines two distinct methodologies for achieving this state.
The first method is called Yuchuda Ila, which translates to higher unity.
Yechuda Ila is exactly what most of us picture when we imagine profound spiritual enlightenment. The text describes it as an intensely intellectual and emotional state.
Like a deep meditation.
Exactly. A person engages in deep, focused meditation on the cosmos, on the infinite nature of the Creator, and on how the entire physical universe is essentially nothingness compared to the divine reality. Through this intense contemplation, their mind and heart ignite. They reach a state where they feel completely nullified, they lose their sense of independent, physical existence, and feel absolutely at one with the universe, swept up in a wave of spiritual ecstasy.
I mean, it sounds incredible. It sounds like the peak experience that every meditation retreat, every ashram, and every mystical tradition is trying to sell you. You dissolve into the oneness.
That does sound ideal.
But then the author introduces the second type of surrender. He calls it Kabbalat Ol, which translates as accepting the yoke.
And accepting the yoke is an entirely different, vastly less glamorous experience.
To put it mildly.
Right. In this state, the person isn't meditating on the cosmos. They aren't experiencing waves of spiritual ecstasy. In fact, their internal state might be a total mess. They might be feeling deeply annoyed, incredibly resistant, or entirely consumed by their own mundane physical desires. They feel very much alive, very physical, and very separate from the divine.
But despite that,
But despite feeling all of their own competing desires, they force themselves to act according to the divine will. They treat themselves like a simple laborer or a servant who just has to execute the job the master commanded, regardless of how uninspired they feel about it. They don't try to change their feelings. They simply submit their physical actions.
okay, I have to stop here because everything in my modern self-actualization obsessed brain rebels against this. Isn't the first method objectively better? Feeling totally spiritually enlightened, understanding your place in the cosmos, and acting from a place of deep, authentic, euphoric connection sounds infinitely superior to just gritting your teeth, turning off your brain, and doing chores for a boss because you have to. One sounds like true enlightenment, the other sounds like mindless drudgery. How can the text possibly argue against authentic spiritual feeling?
That pushback is exactly what the author expects. It is the natural human assumption. But he proceeds to mercilessly deconstruct it.
Let's hear it.
He argues that the higher unity, that feeling of total spiritual enlightenment, is actually deeply flawed and limited. Why? Because consider what is facilitating the experience. It relies entirely on your intellect and your emotions. You are meditating, you are understanding, you are feeling the ecstasy. Therefore, the entire experience is still centered around you.
Wait, let me make sure I'm grasping this. You are saying that because I feel spiritually nullified, I haven't actually surrendered my ego.
Exactly. You have simply traded a gross physical ego for a refined spiritual ego. Your self-awareness is still the vehicle for the connection. You are delighting in your own spiritual elevation. Because you are aware of your own nullification, you are not truly nullified. The self is still very much in the room, taking credit for how enlightened it is.
Wow. That is a devastating critique of spiritual ego.
It really is. But now look at the second method. Accepting the yoke. When you act purely out of subjugation, despite your own internal resistance, you achieve a much truer, far more radical form of nullification.
Because you aren't getting anything out of it.
Exactly. You aren't doing the action because you understand its cosmic significance. You aren't doing it because it gives you a dopamine rush of spiritual pleasure. You might actually hate doing it, but you do it anyway simply because the divine requested it. In that precise moment of blind action against your own internal will, you are completely bypassing the self. Your intellect, your feelings, your need for authentic inspiration, none of them matter. The self is entirely removed from the equation.
And this is where the author brilliantly loops this human psychology back to the physics of the universe we discussed earlier. He connects the dots. He says that the higher unity enlightenment, where you transcend your physical feelings, is the exact psychological equivalent of the rule-breaking miracle.
Yes. Think about the structure. In a rule-breaking miracle, the physical reality of the world is suspended by an overwhelming divine light. In higher unity, the physical reality of the person, their normal everyday consciousness, is suspended by an overwhelming spiritual light. They feel out of their bodies. But as we establish mathematically with the kava, that is the lower form of divine connection, it relies on breaking the boundaries.
Which means accepting the yoke is the psychological equivalent of the miracle clothed in nature.
Exactly. In accepting the yoke, your physical reality, your normal consciousness, your natural desires, they all remain completely intact. You don't transcend them at all. You feel every bit of your human annoyance. But your actions are entirely directed by a higher will. The nature of your being remains, but it acts out the master's command.
That's incredible.
And just as the miracle clothed in nature comes from the absolute deepest essence of the infinite, the kafav, so too does the act of accepting the yoke connect you to a level of the divine far deeper than any spiritual meditation ever could.
What this text is essentially arguing is that gritting your teeth and doing the right thing when you absolutely do not want to is spiritually superior to meditating on a mountaintop until you feel at one with the universe. It is a complete elevation of the physical, highly resistant aspects of our existence over the lofty spiritual ones.
And that psychological realization sets the stage for what is arguably the most radical, mind-bending prophecy in the entire discourse. Because if physical resistant action is higher than spiritual connection, that entirely redefines the relationship between our bodies and our souls.
Yes, we are entering the territory of what I am calling the ultimate flip. The author brings up a concept regarding that ultimate future era we keep returning to, the era mentioned in our original verse from Micah, and he states a rule about how reality currently works. Right now, in our present era, the body is sustained by the soul. The soul is the spiritual engine, it animates the flesh. Without the soul, the body is just inert matter, carbon, and water.
Right, that is Theology 101. We are so used to the standard model where the spiritual is the prime mover, and the physical is just the temporary, somewhat burdensome housing for the eternal spirit.
Exactly. But then the author drops the prophecy. In the future era, this dynamic will be completely reversed. In the ultimate reality, the soul will be sustained by the physical body. The body will become the source of nourishment, elevation, and life for the soul. The physical will feed the spiritual.
It is a total inversion of reality.
And I really struggled with this initially. How does a chunk of physical matter, which is prone to disease, decay, and base animal desires, end up being the power source for a pure divine soul? Like, what is the mechanics behind that?
To understand the mechanics, we have to look at the inherent nature of both the body and the soul, and apply the logic of the kavav and accepting the yoke that we've been building up to. Think about the soul. The soul is naturally spiritual. Its connection to the divine is simply its default factory setting.
It doesn't have to work hard for it.
No, it doesn't have to work hard to be spiritual. It just is. Therefore, the soul's connection to God, while undeniably pure, is somewhat predictable. It relates to the aspects of the divine that are naturally aligned with spirituality.
It's like a fish in water. It doesn't have to overcome any resistance to swim. It's just doing what its biology dictates.
Precisely. The soul swimming in divinity isn't achieving a paradox. But the physical body is inherently, fundamentally separate from the spiritual. By its very definition, the physical world is designed to conceal the divine. The body has physical needs, physical pains, physical lethargy. It is the furthest possible thing from infinite light.
So it's about the distance. The body starts from the absolute bottom.
Yes. Therefore, the text argues, when the physical body, despite its inherent distance, despite its massive resistance, subjugates itself to the divine through a physical action, it accomplishes something mathematically impossible for the soul.
Let me try an analogy here. It's like a rubber band. Well, the soul is just resting there, close to the source. There is no tension. But the physical body is pulled all the way back, stretched as far away from the source as physically possible.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So when the body finally snaps back, when the physical hands and feet actually submit and perform a divine action in this dark world, the kinetic energy, the sheer violent force of that connection, is astronomically higher than the soul's passive connection.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The text explains that because the body's nullification is so totally against its own nature, This is the accepting the yoke in action. It pierces through all the lower levels of spiritual light and taps directly into the absolute deepest essence of the divine.
Past all the regular spiritual levels.
Exactly. It taps into a level of the infinite that the soul, with its comfortable natural spirituality, simply cannot access. The soul can only comprehend the revelations of God. The physical body, through its blind, gritty submission, touches the essence of God.
Think about the implications of this for your everyday life. It means that the physical actions you take, the times you physically hand over your hard-earned money to help a neighbor, or the times you physically bite your tongue to stop yourself from destroying someone's reputation, or when you choose honesty in a business deal when lying would be so much easier, those aren't just minor chores you do while your soul waits to get to heaven.
No, not at all.
Those physical acts are not just housing your spiritual side. By acting against your physical nature, you are actively building a reality where the physical act is actually superior to the spiritual intention.
The author is commanding us to completely reevaluate our physical existence here. The body is not a prison. It is not an obstacle to enlightenment that you need to meditate your way out of. According to this deeply technical and mystical framework, the physical body and its agonizing struggles are the ultimate destination for the highest divine light.
It flips everything.
It does. The entire point of the cosmos is for the physical body to connect to the essence through action. And in that future era, when reality is finally seen clearly, when "I will show him marvelous things" comes to pass, the soul will look at the body and realize, you reached a place in the divine that I never could. And the soul will literally draw its ultimate spiritual nourishment from the physical body's achievements.
It is the ultimate validation of the grueling human struggle. But that forces us to confront the most difficult part of that struggle. The times when we feel completely and utterly disconnected.
Which happens a lot.
Right. If we are supposed to achieve this ultimate flip, why does it seem so incredibly hard, dark, and confusing right now? This takes us to the historical application of all these concepts. The author grounds these cosmic physics in the current era of human history.
He asks a very pointed, almost painful question. Why does this ultimate future revelation, this time when the hidden miracles will be seen and the body will feed the soul, why does it depend specifically on our actions during the time of exile?
We should probably define exile in this context. It's not just a geopolitical term. It refers to the current overarching era of history, an era characterized by spiritual displacement, suffering, confusion, and the profound concealment of divinity. It is the era where the watchmaker is completely invisible.
And the author zeroes in on the very end of this exile. He uses a profound traditional term, the generation of the heels of the Messiah.
The heels of the Messiah. I've always found that imagery so striking. It refers to the final generation before the utopian era begins. The absolute lowest, most degraded part of the body of history. The heel, the part that is heavily calloused, constantly trampling in the dirt, and feels the least amount of sensation.
It's numb.
Yeah, exactly. The author describes this current era as a time of intense spiritual darkness and numbness. But he makes a shocking claim. He argues that this specific generation, operating in this specific darkness, is the only one equipped to unlock the future.
To explain the mechanics of why the darkness is necessary, he draws a sharp comparison between our current era of exile and the ancient historical era of the temple in Jerusalem. Think about what it was like to live during the temple era. Spirituality was objectively obvious. People could literally see the divine presence manifesting.
Oh, to live back then.
Right. They experienced open, undeniable miracles on a regular basis. When they served God, they felt immense spiritual satisfaction. Their intellect and their emotions were fully rapturously engaged.
So their entire connection to the divine was largely based on that Yehuda Elah, the higher unity we discussed. They felt it. It made sense to them. Like the rule-breaking miracles, it was visible and undeniable.
Exactly. They were operating on the level of the surrounding light.
But what happens in the dark times of exile? What happens in the generation of the heels of the Messiah? When all the obvious miracles have ceased, when faith seems completely illogical, when the innocent suffer, and when the world appears to be entirely driven by cold, hard, unforgiving nature.
You feel totally alone.
You do. But in this era, when people continue to study their texts or perform acts of radical kindness or cling stubbornly to their traditions, they aren't doing it because they see a giant spiritual light show validating their choices. They act with pure Kabbalat ol, accepting the yoke. They act in the dark.
Because there is absolutely no immediate reward of feeling enlightened. It is just pure, unadulterated grit. And as we established mathematically earlier, Acting in the dark without the reward of intellectual understanding or emotional feeling is the ultimate form of submission. Because the action isn't motivated by the person's own spiritual ego or desire for enlightenment, it bypasses all the lower spiritual realms and taps directly into that ultimate limitless essence. The darkness of the era isn't a punishment, it is the necessary structural prerequisite for the highest level of connection.
The author uses a specific metaphor here that is so visceral it really anchors the concept. He builds on a phrase from another biblical verse about treading in shoes. He compares our agonizing actions in this dark world to the physical process of making leather shoes.
Think about the tanning process. Think about what a raw animal hide is actually like. It is tough, it is rigid, it is completely unyielding. You cannot just wrap raw hide around your foot and call it a shoe. It would be agonizing and useless.
You'd be bleeding in 5 minutes.
Exactly. To make it into a vessel that can actually hold the human foot and walk effectively on the earth, you have to subject it to violence. You have to soak it, pound it with mallets, stretch it, and work it tirelessly until that rigid, stubborn harshness is broken down and it becomes soft and pliable.
The author argues that this is exactly what we are doing on a macrocosmic scale. The rawhide is the harsh, unyielding nature of our own selfish, animalistic desires. And by extension, it is the harsh, unforgiving laws of the physical universe itself. By acting with self-sacrifice, by forcing ourselves to do the right thing when it is incredibly hard, confusing, and dark, we are literally beating the leather. We are actively softening the rigidness of our own nature, and thereby softening the rigidness of reality.
We are treading the shoes. We are making the physical boundaries of the world pliable enough to actually hold the infinite light without shattering like that 60-watt bulb.
And this leads to my absolute favorite part of the discourse, where the author proves this concept using a piece of mathematical theology. He utilizes gematria, the traditional Jewish system of numerology, where every Hebrew letter holds a specific numerical value. Now, I normally push back heavily on numerology. It often feels like you can just manipulate numbers to prove whatever point you want.
That is a common and valid critique of gematria. But you have to understand the foundational premise of the author's worldview. In this mystical framework, the Hebrew language is not viewed as a descriptive human invention. It is viewed as the actual structural source code of reality. The letters are the atomic building blocks of existence. Therefore, if two words share the exact same mathematical value, it isn't a cute coincidence. It reveals an absolute underlying structural identity between those two concepts.
Okay, assuming that framework, the math he presents is mind-blowing. He points out the numerical value for the specific name of God that represents strict judgment, limitation, and the concealment of divine light. That name is Elohim. If you add up the letters of Elohim, the numerical value is 86.
Right. And then he looks at the Hebrew word for nature, the physical system of the universe, which is Hateva. If you add up the letters for Hateva, the numerical value is exactly 86.
Elohim equals 86. Nature equals 86.
The author uses this structural equivalence to prove a massive point. The cold, seemingly godless, unforgiving system of nature is the concealed, rigid judgment of God. They are mathematically and spiritually identical. Nature is not an absence of God. It is God wearing the heavy, rigid armor of Elohim.
Wow.
Therefore, when a person living in the darkest, most confusing era of history works relentlessly against their own stubborn, selfish nature, they aren't just engaged in a self-help project. They are actively engaging with the architecture of Elohim. They are softening the leather of the entire universe's nature, preparing the physical boundaries of reality to finally be able to hold the blinding, infinite light of the future era.
It places a staggering cosmic responsibility on the individual. Your personal, invisible struggle with your own bad habits on a Tuesday morning is literally the machinery softening the universe.
It's massive.
But the author doesn't just leave it in the present day. He insists that this grand cosmic softening process didn't just start in our current exile. It was initiated at the very beginning of the story. And this brings us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, allowing us to finally solve the mysteries we opened with.
We finally return to Micah chapter 7, verse 15. As in the days of your coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show him marvelous things. Let's resolve the grammatical anomalies using everything we've built. First anomaly. Why the plural days of Egypt when the Exodus was just one day?
Because, the author argues, the Exodus wasn't just a 24-hour event.
Exactly. The days of your coming out doesn't just refer to the day they physically walked past the border guards of Egypt. It encompasses the entire sequence of the Exodus, which culminated on the seventh day with the splitting of the Red Sea. Now, we have to ask, why is the splitting of the Red Sea so structurally vital to the future?
Right. Why highlight that specifically?
Because the author argues that the splitting of the Red Sea was not just a rescue mission, it was a cosmic inauguration. It opened what the text refers to as the pipe.
The ultimate metaphysical pipe.
Yes. When the sea was split, a massive channel, a conduit, was violently carved through the metaphysical fabric of reality. It permanently connected the highest, most infinite spiritual realms directly to the lowest, most finite physical realms. By splitting the sea back then, they essentially pre-authorized or unlocked the capacity for all future miracles.
The text specifically mentions a future prophecy about the splitting of the river, which serves as a metaphor for an even greater ultimate cosmic connection that will happen in the utopian era.
And the author argues that the future splitting of the river was actually initiated in a completely hidden foundational way back at the splitting with the Red Sea.
Mm.
The Red Sea basically laid the subterranean cabling for the future river.
So the word days is plural because it must include the seventh day, the splitting of the sea, because that was the event that fundamentally altered the physics of reality, making the future era possible in the first place.
Hmm.
Every future miracle, every hidden marvel was downloaded as a hidden zip file back in Egypt.
Great analogy.
Okay, that brilliant stroke solves anomaly number 2. But what about the third anomaly? Who is the him? I will show him marvelous things. Why the jarring shift to the third person?
To answer this final puzzle, the author quotes directly from the Zohar, the foundational bedrock text of Jewish mysticism. The Zohar states plainly that the word him refers to Moses.
Moses. Okay, so God is saying to the people, as in the days of your coming out of Egypt, I will show Moses marvelous things. Walk me through the logic of that.
It makes perfect structural sense if we understand Moses' role. Moses was the conduit. He was the one who lifted his staff and physically opened the pipe at the Red Sea. He initiated the process that contained the blueprint for all future miracles. However, because those future miracles, the incredibly high miracles powered by the Kagav and clothed perfectly in nature, were designed to be hidden, Moses didn't get to see the ultimate result of his own labor.
Ah, because it was all concealed in nature.
Exactly. He opened the pipe, but the water hadn't fully flowed through the system yet. So this prophecy is actually a deeply personal promise to Moses. God is saying, in the ultimate future era, I will finally show him the one who started it all, the visible culmination of the incredibly hidden wonders he unlocked back in Egypt.
It's a beautiful, poetic completion of his life's work. He finally gets to see the end product. But in here is where the author delivers his final, empowering twist. He insists that we cannot read this merely as ancient history or as a private promise to a single historical prophet who died millennia ago.
No, we absolutely can't.
Because in this mystical tradition, Moses isn't just a guy with a beard who lived thousands of years ago. There is a Moses within every single human being.
This is a crucial psychological concept.
Mm.
The Moses within represents a person's absolute deepest capacity for truth. It is their inner core of pure, unadulterated faith, and their ultimate ability to perceive divinity when the blinders are removed. And here, the author synthesizes everything we've debated into a single, comprehensive formula for unlocking the future.
Bringing it all together.
Yes. To actually reach the point where the hidden miracles of nature are laid bare, where we can clearly see the infinite operating in the mundane, we need both parts of the equation to activate.
We need the grit of the physical, and we need the optics of the spiritual.
Exactly. First, we need the pure, gritty, unfeeling action that we execute in the dark. We desperately need accepting the yoke. We need to do the grueling hard work of softening the rigid leather of our own nature, fighting our habits, doing the right thing when it hurts. That physical action in the dark is the only mechanism that draws down the absolute essence of the infinite into the physical world. That is what builds the reality of the future. But if you just build the reality without developing the ability to perceive it, you are still blind in the dark.
So simultaneously, we have to awaken the Moses within us. We have to cultivate our capacity for deep understanding, for revelation, for spiritual sight. We study, we refine our minds, we seek truth, so that when all that hard physical work finally pays off and the blinding truth of reality's perfection is finally shown, we actually possess the internal architecture to comprehend it. You soften the universe with your physical actions, and you awaken your inner Moses to witness the final results.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I am genuinely sitting here trying to process the scale of what we just covered. It is a masterpiece of architectural thought. Let's take a collective breath and organically retrace the steps we just took, because the density of this text is wild. We started by being annoyed at the clumsy grammar of a single verse in Micah. Why benchmark the future to Egypt? Why plural days? Who is the mysterious him?
And it led us down quite the rabbit hole.
It did. And to answer those seemingly pedantic questions, we had to realize that flashy, physics-breaking miracles are actually the crude cheat codes of the universe, deeply inferior to the hidden miracles that perfectly masquerade as political coincidence or bad luck.
Which logically forced us to the realization that the most mundane, predictable laws of nature, the rising sun, the turning of the earth, the beating of a heart, are actually the highest possible expressions of infinite divine energy, condensed perfectly through the Kavif.
And because the physical world is the ultimate, most difficult canvas for the infinite, it means our physical bodies, when they submit, when they accept the yoke and do hard things, reach a higher place in the divine essence than our pure, enlightened souls ever could. And all of this culminates right now in our exact era.
In the darkness.
Yes, in the darkness. Our struggles in the dark, our moments of feeling completely uninspired but choosing to do the right thing anyway, are the exact mechanical gears softening the rigid leather of the universe. We are preparing it for the moment when the Moses within us will finally open its eyes and see the hidden marvels that have been operating behind the scenes all along.
It is a framework that takes the exhausting, ordinary grind of human existence and infuses it with absolute, staggering cosmic significance. And it leaves us with a final thought to mull over, building directly on the author's concept of the heels of the Messiah and these hidden miracles.
What's the takeaway for the listener?
Well, we learned today that the absolute highest miracles are the ones where the beneficiary doesn't even know a rescue is happening. And we learned that the ultimate divine revelation requires the darkest, most confusing era to unlock it through pure, unfeeling action. So consider the implications for your own psychology today. What if the moments in your own life when you feel the most disconnected, the most in the dark, the most frustrated, and the most uninspired, what if those are actually the exact moments you are generating the most profound light? What if your greatest, most enduring impact on the universe is happening right now, completely undetected by your own senses?
What if the watchmaker isn't just turning the gears out there in the ether? What if your agonizing daily struggles are the gears? You don't need to see the mechanism to know it is building a masterpiece. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. I highly encourage you to look at the ordinary world around you today, and especially your own daily frustrations, your routines, your resistance, through this radically elevated lens. Until next time.